This is the first area that I ever created for my indie game, Legend 64. In this devlog, I've given it a complete overhaul, as I've often felt there are a lot of improvements I could make to it. Welcome to the castle's new location. This new environment was created to address several problems I've had with the castle's old design that I've been wanting to correct for a long time. Perched high up on a mountaintop, it commands a sweeping overlook view of a deep lakeside valley. In the old environment, the terrain is completely flat, offering very few compelling vantage points, resulting in a space that is not that interesting to explore. I feel like my level design has improved a lot since then, so I've often felt like this area could do with a rework. The scale of the castle itself also looks quite puny, and it wasn't conveying the level of grandeur I wanted it to. A huge portion of the game takes place here, and yet it doesn't feel that impactful when you're stood outside it. It also sits so low down in the environment, which throws the scale off even more. Because of this, you don't really appreciate it unless the character is positioned really far away, or if you enter the first-person view for a better look. I think this is the element that's bothered me the most, and probably the biggest reason why I've wanted to remake this to begin with. I think that my desire to change it has largely stemmed from my daily commute into work, where I catch glimpses of this huge cathedral every morning. It's always impressed me because it just towers above the surrounding landscape, and you can see it from most parts of town. You may even recognize it, as it was featured in the 1976 film, The Omen. Perhaps it's because it appears in such a creepy movie, but it just looks so ominous and imposing to me. This got me thinking about the need for a central landmark in my game. Much how the clock tower in Majora's Mask can be seen from most places in Termina, it kind of becomes synonymous with the game itself. In much the same way, I want the castle to be part of my game's iconography, and to further that goal, I want it to be visible from more parts of the game world, and to have a greater presence in its immediate environment. With these thoughts in mind, I began designing the new location for the castle. I created a blockout for the new environment, and made it steadily rise up toward the castle. I tried to focus on elevating the castle high above the terrain below, so that it would always be in view to the player. When you get close enough to it, it looms over you in an oppressive way. I've added a lot of space in front of the castle because I want this area to feel like the front doorstep, as it were. The surrounding valley offers a sweeping view of the lake below, and runs down into a mysterious forest. I gave the blockout landscape some textures to help me gauge the scale of the environment. Adding the forest below helped a lot because it allowed me to compose the view of the castle a lot better. With the blockout complete, I went back into Blender and repurposed my old castle model. The lower sections of the castle sit upon supports that jut out from the mountainside. I looked specifically at the Kiyomizu Temple in Japan, as I loved the look of the large wooden pillared balcony of the main hall. It gives the structure a really unique appearance, and the rickety look of the beams themselves make it look so ancient and mysterious. Because this is an N64 style game, I chose to represent the wooden beams for a texture rather than modelling them individually. I've repeated the texture a few times on both sides of the tower, and rather than make a new texture for the rest of the supports, I've just stretched the existing one down. Simple but effective. I've added a trim along the bottom so that the supports blend in with the mountainside a bit better. It's always a challenge to balance the look of the N64 with my own artistic intentions, so I've tried to bump up the shadows on the different beams to make it look like there's some depth. Above the main entrance to the castle, I've modelled a giant Shimenawa to mark the threshold of the mortal world and the realm of the spirits. The final model is 270 triangles. I've tried to maintain a strong silhouette in the design, so that it still reads well in the environment despite the low poly count. And here it is in front of the castle. It has quite an ominous implication, don't you think? I feel like it adds a certain level of anticipation and expectancy when you're waiting around out here. I also like that when you exit the castle, it hangs low enough down that it frames the environment in front of you. The valley leading up to the castle features several bridges spanning a river and cascading waterfall. I'm actually really happy with how this area turned out. Something about it just hits a special spot in my brain. It reminds me a lot of Gerudo Valley actually, so my inner child is really pleased. I particularly like the view you get when you're standing on this central rock. It just feels so atmospheric. I'm also quite taken with the stone lanterns at the foot of the hill. and I was really eager to see how this area would look with them lit. Lighting is huge in how an environment feels, so I wanted a way to set up different types of lighting in order to create a variety of different moods. I've gone to great pains setting up a complex lighting system, so I'm going to go ahead and give you a breakdown now. In my previous devlog, I implemented a game-wide time system for handling how the NPC's schedules would work, but I also wanted to use it to dynamically set different types of lighting as the in-game day progresses. However, achieving retro lighting effects in Unreal Engine has always proved a difficult task for me because everything is completely faked through bespoke shaders I've created. The plus side of this is that I have complete control over how I choose to light the levels. I can edit any individual element of the scene and tweak it as I see fit. I don't need to adhere to realistic constraints and can make decisions purely on artistic merit. For example, I've added these fog effects around the castle to give it a sense of depth, and I can make the sea and mountains fade off into the distance. All of these visual tricks make the map feel much larger than it actually is. There's a lot of flexibility with this approach. Things like the sun position can be changed to fit the desired composition, and I can edit all kinds of things like the intensity of these sun rays or how blue it is under the water. Obviously there's no swimming yet. The downside is that there's no standardized workflow for approaching any of this, and I've had to come up with my own methods to cheat how lighting works. At first I made a bunch of different copies of the same castle map and gave each one its own unique lighting setup, based upon the different times of day. What I needed was a way to blend between the different lighting I had made, but all within the same level. And this was my plan. I would convert everything on the level that needed to change and store it as a dynamic reference. I would then take my references and edit them using a series of parameters that could be changed on the fly. Then taking the game time, I would find a way to blend between the different values. Well, it took a lot of time, but I finally come up with a method that actually does what I wanted it to. Using a lerp node, I can take two values and blend between them both by adjusting the alpha parameter. Here I'm blending between two colors, red and blue, a value of 0 equaling pure red and 1 being fully blue. When taking the alpha blend value and passing it along into a material instance, it can be used to smoothly transition from one color to another. The trick was finding a way to convert my game time into a value that I could use with the lerp, so that the blend between values would be consistent with the time of day. In this example, I'm using my game's time system to determine what hour the blend between parameters needs to occur. So at any point during 6 o'clock, the dynamic material instances will be performing a blend from red to blue. Once the clock hits 7, the blend will then move from blue to green. Let's see it in action in this test environment. This time I've frozen the game clock. Observe what happens when I manually advance the time by an increment of 5 in-game minutes. At exactly 30 minutes, the blend value is 0.5, or half of the total lerp value, which gives us the color purple. Reversing the time takes us all the way back to red. The alpha blend is non-sequential, meaning that if I enter this area at 6:30, the level should already be purple. Let's set the game time to 6:30 and try playing the level now. Booyah! Obviously, there's a lot more parameters to blend between in the real level. The system makes a reference of everything in the scene, so it can be dynamically altered at runtime. Alright, I've got all my different times of day hooked up. Let's finally do this thing. I can't even begin to describe how rewarding it is to finally have gotten dynamic lighting in the game. It's taken a lot of effort on my part, and I'm proud of the method I came up with to achieve it. I can toggle forward and back between the different times of day, or just increase the speed of the game's clock. It looks similar to how the Sun Song works in Ocarina of Time, which I think is pretty neat. To add some extra oomph, I've created my own custom lens flare system and anchored it to the sun. This was actually incredibly difficult to set up, and it took way longer than I was intending it to. It works by shooting a line from the light source to the camera, and then offsetting its endpoint to make it move across the screen. The flares are then positioned along this line to create the effect. I'm very grateful to have this in the game, as it makes the sun have a greater presence in the level. One last thing that I really wanted was to have these lanterns begin to turn on at different speeds, as I thought it would look very mechanical if they turned on all at once. Totally worth the hours I spent setting that up. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope you found it interesting and a little insightful. I'd like to take this moment to thank my 64-bit Rumble Pack patrons for their continued support. An extra special thank you to SDC Stringer, Philip Iono, and Catboy King. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your generosity. And as always, thank you to these 64-bit legends for continuing to support the project. LRC Napkin, Mason Stooksberry, Matt Papa, Waro Duck, Melty Metroid, Daniel H. Hernandez, Starkium, Power Hungry Fool, Twyla27, Robert M. Stwali IV, Baby Funky Kong, Void Kitten, Shinku Aura, Kanzen Sun, Bo Echo, Great Mate, Gustav64, Decky Like Doog, Joel Acklen, Yawning Bear, Ezra Brunzil, Zombotic, Skirote, Cassidy, Austin Linguist, Something Something, Sebastian Soderquist, Nay Hey Ray, Ritzler, Cormac, Andy22725, Mr. Joey Proso, Tava, Duncan Famel, Parker Holly, Linkster777, Max Kasari, Pink81, and Scylla Lizard. Thank you all. Thank you as well to my 16-bit patrons. I hope you've enjoyed watching this devlog, and I'll see you in the next one.